Good to be with you again. And though we got a few people missing this morning, it's good to have everyone that did come here. And of course, the folks joining us on the live stream.
Lepo, da smo spet skupaj. Danes sicer pogrešamo nekaj ljudi, ampak nekaj pa nas je tukaj. Seveda so tukaj tudi naši prijatelji, ki nas poslušajo preko interneta.
So we are continuing to look at the prophecies and pictures of Jesus in the Old Testament.
Še naprej si gledamo prerokbe in ilustracije Jezusa Kristusa v Stari zavezi.
And so today we're going to be, if you have a Bible, going to be in Exodus chapter 12, second book of Moses, chapter 12.
In danes, če imate s sabo Biblijo, si bomo pogledali Eksodus oziroma drugo Mozesovo knjigo, bomo nadaljevali v 12. poglavju.
And I don't know about you, but I have enjoyed this series of messages, and I hope you have so far.
Ne vem za vas, ampak mi uživamo v branju te serije sporočil in upamo, da tudi vi uživate.
And I don't think there's no way to deny that from what we've seen to this point, over and over again, God has shown His plan to bring sinful people back to Himself all the way through the Bible.
In glede na to, kar smo prebrali do te točke, ni mogoče zanikati, da je Bog znova in znova pokazal, da pripelje grešne ljudi k sebi na stranih svoje besede.
There are so many things that we've already pointed to which line up exactly with what God promised and ultimately brought to pass through the life and sacrificial death of Jesus.
Toliko ljudi, ki smo jih že povedali, se ravno poravna, se točno ujema s tem, kaj je Bog obljubil in na koncu uresničil skozi Jezusovo življenje in Jezusovo žrtveno smrt.
So we saw last week the picture of the Passover lamb was yet another powerful example of the picture that God would fulfill through Jesus.
In kot smo videli prejšnji teden, je bila ta ilustracija o velikonočnem jagnjetu, ilustracija še en močen primer, ki jo je Bog potem izpolnil skozi Jezusa Kristusa.
It was the shedding of Jesus' innocent blood that was the ultimate offer of Himself in place of guilty mankind.
To prelivanje nedolžne krvi, ker je Jezus na koncu svojo kri prelil za celotno človeštvo.
So at the end of the message last week we saw that God had just brought His children out of Egypt.
In ko smo videli prejšnji teden, je Bog svoje otroke ravno popeljal iz Egipta.
As a matter of fact, Pharaoh had demanded that they leave.
Faraon je celo zahteval, da odidejo.
So now they're heading back to the land that God had promised them many years ago.
In zdaj se vračajo v to deželo, ki jim je Bog obljubil pred davnimi leti.
And we're going to pick up the story exactly where we left off last week in Exodus chapter 12.
In zgodbo bomo zdaj nadaljevali točno tam, kjer smo končali prejšnji teden v Eksodusu 12. poglavje.
Now, so I should say something here. I'm not sure how many people you're picturing or how big the group is that Moses was leading out of Egypt.
Nekaj bi bilo treba povedati. Ne vem, koliko ljudi si vi predstavljate, da je Mojzes vodil skozi Egipt.
If you remember, Joseph had brought his brothers and their families to Egypt because of the famine.
Če se spomnite, je najprej Jožef pripeljal svoje brate, svojo družino v Egipt zaradi lakote.
That was a group of about 70 people at that time.
In vse skupaj je bilo tega starostva skupno 70 ljudi približno.
So now we're talking about 430 years later and the family, the Israelites, have grown considerably. We're going to look at verses 37 and 38.
Zdaj pa govorimo o času, ki je 430 let po tem Jožefovem prihodu v Egipt In ta družina, ti Izraeliti so se takrat kar namnožili, kar bomo zdaj pogledali.
Said, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children, obviously women also, and a mixed multitude went up with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle.
Torej, beremo verze 37-38, kjer piše: Izraelovi sinovi so se odpravili iz Ramesesa v Sukot, kakih 600,000 pešcev, mož brez otrok. Tudi dosti drugih ljudi je šlo z njimi, ter drobnica in govedo, silno veliko živine.
So, before I get into the rest of the notes here, I wanted to say that mixed multitude that we just read about, those were ones who were not Israelites. Those were some who had seen the works and power of God and had believed in Him.
Torej, govorimo ne samo o Izraelcih, ampak tudi o drugih ljudeh, ki so videli moč Boga in so sprejeli Božjo besedo.
So 600,000 men, not counting women and children, that's a lot of people.
Torej, piše 600,000 mož, ne da bi šteli ženske in otroke. To je ogromno.
Many people believe the size of the whole group that left Egypt could have been as many as 2 million people.
Veliko ljudi verjame, da je celotna skupina, se pravi, z ženskami in otroci, štela okrog 2 milijona ljudi.
So imagine this now, a group of 2 million people who are not soldiers, who have never been trained for battle.
Zdaj si predstavljate ogromno skupino 2 milijona ljudi in to niso neki vojaki, niso bili trenirani za bojevanje.
What are these people coming out of Egypt? They're slaves.
Kot kaj oni prihajajo iz Egipta? Oni so sužnji.
Which would mean that they had the mentality of slaves.
In to pomeni tudi, da imajo miselnost sužnjev.
They'd never thought for themselves.
Ni bilo nikoli treba razmišljati zase.
They never made plans for themselves.
Nikoli jim ni bilo treba delati načrtov zase.
They simply did what they were told.
Oni so preprosto počeli tisto, kar jim je bilo rečeno.
Now, obviously we know God certainly knows what He is dealing with as He brings these slave mentality children out of Egypt.
In seveda Bog ve, kaj dela, ko pelje te svoje otroke s suženjsko miselnostjo ven iz Egipta.
The first thing He wants to do is He wants them to trust Him and understand that He knows what's best for them. So this is what He does. We're going to read in Exodus chapter 13.
In prvo, kar Bog hoče, je, da mu ti ljudje zaupajo, da vejo, da On ve, kaj je zanje najboljše, zakaj to počne. Zato bomo brali naprej.
So Exodus chapter 13, I'm going to read verses 17, 18, and 21. It says, and it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was closer, because God said, it may be that the people change their mind when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people through the way of the wilderness, we could say desert, of the Red Sea. And the children went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them in a way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and by night.
Torej beremo 13. poglavje, 17. in 18. in potem 21. vers, kjer piše: Ko je faraon odpustil ljudstvo, jih Bog ni peljal po poti dežele Filistejcev, čeprav je bila blizu. Bog je namreč rekel, da bi se ljudstvo morda ne skesalo, ko bi videli vojsko in se ne bi vrnilo v Egipt. Zato je Bog napotil ljudstvo po puščavski poti proti Trstičnemu morju in Izraelovi sinovi so v bojnem redu odšli iz egiptovske dežele. Gospod pa je hodil pred njimi podnevi v oblačnem stebru, da jih je vodil po poti, in po noči v ognjenem stebru, da jim je svetil in so lahko hodili podnevi in po noči.
So this is a map of the area that we're talking about. Coming out of Egypt, God did not lead them through this way to get to the promised land. Instead, he took them down this direction.
Se pravi, to je zemljevid tega bližnjega vzhoda, kot vidimo, in Bog jih ni vodil po najbližji poti tukaj, ampak jih je vodil dol proti jugu.
Because he just explained if they were to go here, they would immediately run into people all the way going that direction who would war against them.
Ker Bog je vedel, da če bi šli oni po tej poti, bi takoj naleteli na ljudi, ki bi se proti njim bojevali.
And God wanted to show them something very special before they begin to get into this area where they're actually going to have to war.
In Bog jim je hotel pokazati nekaj res posebnega, preden bojo šli v to deželo, kjer bo padlo vojno.
So God understood that slaves facing war so early after leaving Egypt would have caused them to panic and want to go back home.
Torej, Bog je vedel, da bi sužnji lahko začeli zganjati paniko in bi hoteli iti nazaj domov.
And we're about to see why God would think that.
In kmalu bomo videli, zakaj je Bog tako mislil.
First, he wanted to show them his power once again so that they might have every reason to trust him.
Bog jim je najprej hotel pokazati svojo moč, zato da bi oni imeli vsak razlog, da bi mu verjeli.
I do want to point out that last verse that we read there about the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire.
In če se spomnite, ti zadnji vers, ki smo ga brali o stebru dima in stebru ognja.
And quite honestly, we could talk about just these things as an example of Christ also. But if we speak about everything, every one of the pictures in the Old Testament, we would never finish.
Že o tem bi lahko govorili kot o ilustraciji Jezusa Kristusa, ampak če bomo govorili o vsaki stvari, potem ne bomo nikoli prišli do konca.
In the Hebrew, which the original language of the Old Testament, the words used here, went before them, also meant walked before them.
V hebrejskem jeziku, v katerem je Stara zaveza originalno napisana, kjer piše šel pred njimi, pomeni hkrati tudi hodil pred njimi.
So this provided a guide and shade by day and warmth and light by night.
Torej, on jih je hkrati vodil, hkrati jim je podnevi dajal senco in ponoči jim je dajal toploto.
But we need to keep moving, so we've a lot to cover today.
Ampak moramo iti naprej, veliko imamo za pokriti danes.
So as we pointed to the map there, we saw that the Israelites now, they're camped by the Red Sea, as this is exactly where God has led them.
Torej, ko smo gledali tale zemljevid, smo videli, da so zdaj Izraelci utaborjeni pred Rdečim morjem, točno tam, kjer je Bog hotel.
And God is about to show them more of his plan now, as we're about to read in Exodus chapter 14.
In zdaj jim bo Bog pokazal še več svojega načrta, kot bomo tudi prebrali v Eksodusu 14. poglavje.
Here's where we see that Pharaoh has had a change of mind, and they begin to question why they had ever let the Israelites go.
V tem trenutku se faraon premisli in se začne spraševati, zakaj sem sploh spustil te Izraelce.
Pharaoh goes into a rage and he readies his chariots to chase down and recapture his slaves.
Faraon pobesni in pošlje svoje kočije, vojake, da bi spet ujel te sužnje.
So we'll continue the story in verses 9 through 12 now.
Torej, nadaljujemo zgodbo v verzih 9 do 12.
It says, but the Egyptians pursued after them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi-Hahiroth before Baal-Zephon. And when Pharaoh came close, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes and saw the Egyptians marching after them. And they were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in this wilderness? Why have you done this to us, to take us out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell you in Egypt, saying, Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? Because it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness.
Torej piše, Egipčani so jih zasledovali z vsemi faraonovimi konji, vozovi, konjeniki in vojsko in jih dohiteli, ko so taborili ob morju pri Hahirotu pred Baal-Cefonom. Ko se je faraon bližal, so Izraelovi sinovi vzdignili oči in zagledali Egipčane, ki so šli za njimi. Izraelovi sinovi so se silno prestrašili in so vpili Gospodu. Rekli so Mojzesu, ali ni bilo mar grobov v Egiptu, da si nas odpeljal, da umremo v puščavi? Kaj si nam storil, da si nas izpeljal iz Egipta? Ali ti nismo že v Egiptu govorili in rekli, pusti nas, da služimo Egipčanom, saj bi bilo bolje za nas, da bi služili Egipčanom, kakor da umremo v puščavi?
Does this seem surprising to anyone else as much as it surprises me?
A se to zdi komu bolj presenetljivo, kot to preseneča nas?
That the idea that the Israelites should be talking like this after God had brought them out of slavery is shocking to me.
Meni se zdi, da je to, da Izraelci tako govorijo z Mojzesom, svojim Bogom, potem ko jih je Bog rešil iz suženjstva, se mi zdi šokantno.
But we have to understand, we don't have the mentality of slaves.
Ampak moramo pa vedeti, da mi nimamo te miselnosti, kot so imeli ti sužnji.
We know the Israelites had cried out to God for deliverance.
Mi vemo, da so Izraeliti klicali k Bogu za izpolnitev obljube.
And hadn't they seen all the things that God had done to Egypt to secure their release?
Ampak, a niso videli, kaj je Bog vse naredil v Egiptu, da bi zagotovil to njihovo rešitev?
Didn't they remember how God kept his promise to them?
A niso videli, kako je Bog držal obljubo, ki jim je dal?
They did not, and we know why, because they had the mentality of slaves. We could say victims.
Tega oni niso dojeli. In to zato, ker so imeli to miselnost sužnjev ali žrtev.
They had never told Moses that they wanted to stay in Egypt.
Oni niso nikoli rekli Mojzesu, da hočejo ostati v Egiptu.
But now, at the first hint of a challenge, they crumple into a heap and start blaming Moses.
Ampak zdaj, takoj, ko se pojavijo težave, začnejo obtoževati Mojzesa.
Could this describe God's children, like us, when unexpected things happen in our lives?
A to lahko opisuje Božje otroke, kot smo mi, ko se nepričakovane stvari zgodijo v našem življenju?
I have to wonder if sometimes we have a victim's mentality and we curl up in a ball and start blaming God for what's happening in our life.
Včasih se sprašujemo, če nismo tudi mi taki, da ko se začnejo težave, da se stisnemo k sebi pa obtožujemo Boga za naše težave.
Maybe we should think that God has a plan in our lives just like he does for the children that he is bringing out of Egypt.
Mogoče bi morali verjeti, da ima Bog namen, načrt v našem življenju, tako kot je imel Izraeliti, ki jih je peljal iz Egipta.
But we're going to keep reading here in verses 13 through 16 and 18 through 22 of Exodus chapter 14.
In še naprej bomo brali verze 13 do 16 in potem 18 do 22 v 14. poglavju.
It says, As Moses said to the people, Do not fear, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you this day. For the Egyptians who you see today, you will not see them again forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said unto Moses, Why are you crying out to me? Speak to the children of Israel to go forward. Lift up your rod, stretch out your hands over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the middle of the sea. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of clouds sent from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all the night. And the children of Israel went into the middle of the sea upon dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left.
Ja, piše. Mojzes je rekel ljudstvu, nikar se ne bojte, ustrajajte in boste videli rešitev, ki vam je bo danes naklonil Gospod. Kajti kakor danes vidite Egipčane in jih ne boste videli nikdar več. Gospod se bo bojeval za vas, vi pa ostanite mirni. Gospod je rekel Mojzesu, kaj opišeš k meni? Ukaži Izraelovim sinovom, naj se odpravijo. Ti pa povzdigni palico in iztegni roko nad morje in ga razdeli, da bodo šli Izraelovi sinovi po suhem sredi morja. Egipčani bodo spoznali, da sem jaz Gospod, ko pokažem svoje veličastvo nad faraonom, nad njegovim vozom in konjeniki. Tedaj se je premaknil Božji angel, ki je hodil pred Izraelovo vojsko in se postavil za njimi. In premaknil se je oblačni steber, ki je bil pred njimi in se postavil za njimi. Tako je prišel med egiptovsko in izraelsko vojsko. Bil je oblak in tema, vendar se je svetlikalo v noči in vso noč se niso približali drug drugemu. Tedaj je Mojzes iztegnil roko nad morje in Gospod je gnal morje z močnim vzhodnim vetrom vso noč nazaj. Iz morja je naredil suho zemljo in vode so se razdelile. Izraelovi sinovi so šli sredi morja po suhem in vode so jim bile kakor zid na desni in levi.
I love this passage of scripture right here.
Zelo mi je všeč ta besedilo.
There's so many interesting things to see in just these verses.
Zelo veliko zanimivih stvari smo prebrali v teh verzih.
I mean, the first thing that occurs to my mind, maybe because I have the mentality of a young person, is imagine this world's largest, world record size aquarium that the children of Israel walked through as they journeyed through the Red Sea.
Prva stvar, na katero pomislim, je mogoče zato, ker imam miselnost mlade osebe, je akvarij velikosti, svetovni rekord, kjer je morje razdaljeno in se vidijo verjetno še ribe notri v morju.
And these waters were being held up only by the hand of God.
In to vodo je narazen držala samo Božja roka.
I could imagine walking through there and just walking over to the wall of water and looking at it.
Predstavljam si, da hodim ob tem morskem zidu in gledam notri.
It's a great story.
To je odlična zgodba.
But there are some other things that we can see here too. We can see Moses' great faith in God.
Vidimo pa tudi druge stvari. Vidimo Mojzesovo veliko zvestobo Bogu.
Moses has already seen God do many miraculous things, and everything that God had said to Moses had come to be.
Mojzes je od Boga doživel že veliko čudežnih stvari. Vse, kar je Bog naredil, vse, kar je Bog obljubil, vse se je zgodilo.
Moses had zero doubts that God is going to show the children of Israel something very special, and he's going to save them all.
Mojzes je imel nič dvoma v to, da Bog ne bi izpolnil svoje obljube in on je vedel, da bo z nekim čudežem rešil vse.
I think it's also clear that he didn't know exactly what God is going to do, but there's one thing, he did trust God.
Mislim tudi, da mogoče ni vedel, kaj bo Bog točno naredil, ampak on je zaupal Bogu.
Because God had led them to this exact spot, God was going to save them.
Ker Bog če jih je že pripeljal točno na to mesto, jih bo Bog tudi rešil.
And he also knew that they would not need to fight this battle for themselves.
Bog je tudi vedel, da se ljudem ne bo treba boriti zase.
What he did know is God would win this battle for them.
Vedel pa je, da bo Bog zmagal to bitko za ljudi.
Now the next thing I think here is a humorous interaction between Moses and God.
Naslednja stvar, ki jo vidimo, je tudi ta dosti zanimiva interakcija med Mojzesom in Bogom.
You remember Moses said to the people, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord."
Mogoče se spomnite, Mojzes reče ljudem, trdno stojite in boste videli Božjo rešitev.
And it's not written, but I can imagine it's then Moses turns and says, "Okay, God, I trust you, and I told them that they can trust you, and I also told them to stand still and watch. Now, what are you going to do?"
Predstavljam si, da potem se Mojzes obrne k Bogu pa reče, ok, Bog, jaz ti verjamem in rekel sem ljudem, naj trdno zaupajo vate, kaj pa ne zdaj naredimo?
God says, "Why are you crying out to me? Don't tell them to stand there and do nothing. You tell them to move forward."
Bog pa mu reče nazaj, zakaj zdaj kličeš name? Ne reč ljudem, naj trdno stojijo, reči jim, naj se premaknejo naprej.
He says, "You lift up my rod of power over the sea, and I will divide it. And the children of Israel will go through the Red Sea on dry ground."
In mu reče, Mojzes, ti dvigni palco in jaz bom razdelil morje. In Izraelovi sinovi bojo šli po suhem skozi morje.
They would not need to fight this battle, but they would have to move forward.
Ne bo se jim treba bojevati v nobeni bitki, ampak mora se pa premikati naprej.
We saw that God puts himself between the danger of the Egyptian army and his own fearful children.
In vidimo se v resnici Bog postavi med egiptovsko vojsko in med Izraelove otroke.
All of that night, all of the children of Israel would know that God had put a division between them and their enemies.
Vsi v tisti noči, vsi Izraelovi otroci so videli, da se je Bog postavil med njih in med njihove sovražnike.
So the enemies were in the dark, but God's children were given light to cross this Red Sea on dry ground.
In te sovražniki so bili v temi, Izraelovi otroci pa so bili na svetlobi, da so lahko prečkali morje.
Now once again, we need to try to put ourselves in their shoes.
In spet se moramo mi postaviti v njihove čevlje.
Let's say you're a former slave and you've been delivered out of slavery through miraculous means, only now to be pinned up against this unpassable barrier by the entire strength of the Egyptian army.
Predstavljate si, da ste nekdani suženj, s vsemi temi čudežnimi sredstvi ste se rešili iz suženjstva, zdaj pa vas ta moč egiptovske vojske potiska v neprehodno vero.
And the only way you can escape is to walk through this sea of water with who knows how deep it was on your left hand and on your right hand, being held up by nothing but God's invisible hands.
In vaša edina možnost, da se rešite, je ta, da greste v to suho pot morja, ki ga zadržuje samo Božja nevidna roka.
Now, how would you feel about that?
Kako bi se počutili ob tem?
Would you be a little nervous taking that first step down into the sea with the water so deep?
Bi vas malo skrbelo, da greste skozi morje, levo pa desno, pa je visoka voda.
I think maybe being nervous or a little anxious would be an obvious emotion.
Mislim, da bi bilo to zelo očitna reakcija, da greš skozi tako strašljivo.
Maybe even being terrified would be understandable.
Mogoče bi bilo tudi kar logično, da smo prestrašeni.
But on they went.
Ampak vseeno so šli.
It's like the children have, it's as they have gone through the Red Sea, some of them maybe had total and complete confidence in God. I would imagine most had some amount of fear in them, that they begin to make it to the other side.
In ko so šli skozi morje, mogoče jih je bilo nekaj, ki so imeli res to zaupanje v Boga, ampak veliko pa jih je bilo takih, ki pa so verjetno dvomili v to, da bojo res varno prišli na drugo stran.
And as if this display of power was not enough, they're going to see one more thing, the power of God, which we're going to read in the next verses here.
In ko da ta prikaz Božje moči ni dovolj, bomo v naslednjih verzih videli še en prikaz moči Boga.
So verses 23 to 28, then also 30 and 31, it says, "The Egyptians pursued and went after them to the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it happened that in the morning watch the Lord looked at the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of cloud, and troubled the army of Egypt, and took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them heavily. And the Egyptians said, 'Let us flee from the face of Israel, because the Lord fights for them against us.' And the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen.' So Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the seas, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did on the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses."
Torej beremo 14. poglavje 23 do 28 vers in potem še 30 in 31, kjer piše: "Egipčani so jih zasledovali in šli z njimi v sredo morja, vsi faraonovi konji, njegovi vozovi in konjeniki. Ob jutranji straži je Gospod v ognjenem in oblačnem stebru pogledal na egiptovsko vojsko in je zbegal, zaviral je kolesa njihovih voz in jim tako održeval vojno. Tedaj so Egipčani rekli: Bežimo pred Izraelom, kajti Gospod se bojuje zanje proti Egipčanom. Potem je Gospod rekel Mozesu: Iztegni roko nad morje, da se vode vrnejo na Egipčane, na njihove vozove in konjenike. Mojzes je iztegnil roko nad morje in morje se je ob jutranji zori vrnilo na svoje navadno mesto, medtem ko so Egipčani bežali proti njemu. Tako je Gospod pognal Egipčane v sredo morja. Vode so se vrnile in zagrnile vozove in konjenike in vso faraonovo vojsko, ki prišla za njimi v morje. Niti eden izmed njih ni ostal. Tako je Gospod tisti dan rešil Izraelce iz roke Egipčanov in Izrael je videl Egipčane mrtve na morskem obrežju. Ko je Izrael videl mogočno roko, ki jo je Gospod izkazal nad Egipčani, se je ljudstvo balo Gospoda in zaupalo Gospodu in njegovemu služabniku Mojzesu."
What a great victory for the people of God.
Kakšna velika zmaga za Božje otroke.
The thing that had held them down, that had made them slaves and treated them so badly, has been defeated.
Vse tisto, kar jih je tlačilo, kar jih je naredilo sužnje, vse tisto je bilo premagano.
What I want you to see is this: the ones who walked down into that sea full of confidence, the ones who were nervous, the ones who even went in fear, every one of them made it to the other side.
In tako tisti, ki so zaupali, tako tisti, ki so bili negotovi, nervozni zaradi tega, ki jih je bil strah, vsi so prišli na drugo stran.
They only needed to follow the instructions of God, and once they did, they were free from their enemy.
Vse, kar so morali narediti, je to, da so sledili Božji besedi in ko so to končno naredili, so bili osvobojeni svojega sovražnika.
Do you think this Red Sea experience could be compared to entering into a relationship with Christ?
A bi lahko primerjali to hojo skozi Rdeče morje, v hojo v razmerje z Jezusom Kristusom?
For me, I don't know how it could not be a picture of that.
Ne vem, kako to ne bi bila prispodoba tega.
So I want to show you some of the parallels between the two events.
Ne pokažem nekaj usporednic teh dogodkov.
Consider someone becoming open to the idea of the truth of God.
Naprimer, da nekdo postane odprt za idejo o Božji resnici.
They begin to realize that the one true and living God wants to have a relationship with them.
In ta oseba razume, da živi in resnični Bog hoče imeti razmerje z njim.
When that person who is a slave to the sin tries to escape it, sin, and specifically Satan, tries to drag them back to be his slaves.
Ko ta oseba to hoče narediti, hoče zbežati grehu, grešnemu življenju, ga greh in še posebej Satan ga vlečeta nazaj, da bi ostal pri grehu.
And Moses, who is a picture of the Word of God, tells us to look at the means of escape, and God does a great miracle by providing this means of escape.
Mojzes, ki pa je prispodoba Božje besede, pa pravi, naj pogledamo možnosti rešitve in Bog naredi velik čudež, da nam pomaga pri tem prehodu.
So this means of escape is to enter into the Red Sea.
In ta sredstva za pobeg je to, da vstopimo v Rdeče morje.
And in that case, then the Red Sea is a picture of Christ himself.
Rdeče morje pa je slika Jezusa samega.
And so we see that all who enter into him, whether with full certainty or with maybe some fears, they all come out the other side, safe and secure.
Vsi, ki vstopijo van, ne glede na to, ali imajo nekaj strahu, ali so gotovi, bojo prišli na drugo stran varni.
Now think about this. What if someone says, I can't do it, I fear, I'm going to stay on this side of the Red Sea?
Kaj pa, če nekdo reče, ne morem tega narediti, strah me je, ostal bom na tej strani Rdečega morja.
Would they have been safe and secure?
A bojo oni varni in rešeni?
Absolutely not. You had to go through the Red Sea to be safe and secure on the other side.
Absolutno ne. Treba iti skozi Rdeče morje, da pridemo do varnosti, do rešitve.
So this illustration of the Red Sea being Jesus shows us we must go through him.
Ta prispodoba, da je Rdeče morje Jezus, pomeni, da moramo iti skozi njega.
We must be in him.
Moramo biti v njemu.
And over in the New Testament, Paul writes a letter to a church, and this is exactly what Paul says to them in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17.
In tudi Pavel piše to v Novi zavezi, v drugem pismu Korinčanom, 5. poglavje, 17. vers.
Paul says there, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things pass away. Behold, all things become new.
Pavel piše, če torej kdo v Kristusu, je to nova stvaritev. Staro je minilo. Glejte, na staro je novo.
So once this happens, we can become like Moses. We can have that deep faith that may not understand all the details, but we trust God.
In ko se to dogaja, moramo biti kot Mojzes. Mogoče ne bomo vedeli za vse podrobnosti, ampak moramo zaupati Bogu.
We can be like Moses to trust him to fight the battles for them. And then when they see the victories, it helps them to trust him even more.
In moramo biti tako kot Mojzes, da verjamemo Bogu, da skupaj zmagujemo bitke. In ko zmagujemo bitke, potem bomo verjeli še bolj.
Just as God is going to fight the battles for the Israelites here, He's willing to do the same for us.
In tako kot se je Bog pomagal boriti Izraelitom proti Egipčanom, enako se bo tudi za nas bojeval.
And this should bring us deep comfort to every one of us who are children of God.
In to nam lahko prinese velik mir, ker bo to naredil za vse Božje otroke.
He didn't forget about His children here, and He's not going to forget about us, His children.
Bog ni pozabil na svoje otroke tukaj in on ne bo pozabil na nas, Božje otroke.
So, maybe a question today is, which one are you?
Mogoče vprašanje danes je, kateri od teh ste vi?
Are you still a slave standing on the other side of the Red Sea?
A ste vi še vedno tisti suženj, ki čaka na prvi strani Rdečega morja?
Still a slave to your sin?
Ste še vedno suženj svojega greha?
Maybe you might be considering stepping into the Red Sea or stepping into that relationship with God through Jesus.
Mogoče bi razmišljal o tem, da stopite v Rdeče morje, da stopite proti Bogu skozi Jezusa.
Maybe you've already come out the other side, having seen the miracles that God did to rescue you, and it has changed your life forever.
Mogoče pa ste že prišli na drugo stran Rdečega morja, ker ste videli čudeže, ki jih dela Bog in je to spremenilo vaše življenje za vedno.
Each and every one has the opportunity to be on the other side, to be a new creation, but they must come through Christ.
Vsak ima možnost postati nova kreacija, priti k Jezusu Kristusu, ampak mora iti skozi Jezusa Kristusa.
Those old challenges that used to hold you down as a slave can be in the past, and you have a fresh, new peace in your life.
Ti izzivi greha so potem že za vami in imate ta nov mir, ki je znotraj vas.
It is available to everyone, but each one must go forward for themselves as God instructed the children through Moses. They've got to go through on their own.
Ta mir lahko doseže vsak, ampak mora iti naprej. Tako kot je Bog rekel Mozesu, morate se premikati naprej sami.
I can't go for you. I can only go for myself.
Ne more iti Bog namesto vas, lahko greste samo sami zase.
It could be that someone may be watching today, you're standing at the bank of the Red Sea. And so I ask you, what is your decision? Will you stay there or will you go to the other side through Jesus Christ?
Mogoče kdo od vas, ki gledate preko interneta, mogoče stojite zdaj pred Rdečim morjem in sprašujem vas, a boste ostali na tej obali ali boste šli naprej skozi Rdeče morje?
If you have questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to talk to us. We would love to help anyone who wants to take that step into Jesus.
Če imate kakšno vprašanje, mi smo tukaj, vprašajte nas. Z veseljem pomagamo vsakomur, ki razmišlja o tem, da bi šel skozi Jezusa.
If you want that real peace in your life, it can only come through Jesus.
Če si želite mir v svojem življenju, ta lahko pride samo skozi Jezusa.
So if we can be a help to you in any way, we would love to just write us a message. I would love to meet with anyone, me and my wife, Samo. We could meet with you one-on-one anywhere and try to help you see what we have found in God's Word, how to know how to have peace with God.
Torej, če želite, pošljite nam sporočilo, z veseljem se to dobimo osebno, Monte, njegova žena, lahko tudi jaz. Z veseljem odgovorimo na vsako vprašanje in vam pokažemo to, kar smo mi prebrali v knjigi, v Bibliji, ki je Božja beseda.
So that'll wrap up the message for today. We're going to talk about this message. We're going to end the video here, but if you do have something you want to talk about, please let us know. So until next time, we're going to pray that God watches over you, keeps you safe and healthy, but most importantly, you'll find peace in your life.
Torej, s tem zaključujemo današnje sporočilo. želimo vam, da ostanete zdravi in na varnem, še predvsem pa to, da najdete mir v svojem življenju. Nasvidenje.
Okay.